Have you ever used an AI and felt like you're just along for the ride? You type in a prompt and you just kind of get what you get. But what if you could actually grab the controls? What if you could tell the AI how to think? Well, today, we're doing just that. We're going to decode the dials, those advanced settings that let you go from passenger to pilot. Let's dive in. We've all been there, right? You ask an AI a question and get this amazing, creative answer. But then the next time, you get something that's, well, super repetitive and bland. This isn't just random chance. It's a direct result of the settings running under the hood. And understanding these settings is the absolute key to getting the results you actually want. And here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. See this? This isn't some kind of bug. It's totally predictable. A setting called temperature was just set really low. And the result? The same prompt gets the exact same response every single time. It's predictable, for sure. But creative? Not so much. So how does this actually work? Okay, so to get a handle on the controls, first we have to understand the machine itself. A large language model isn't really thinking like we do. At its heart, it's an incredibly powerful prediction engine. Its whole job, literally its only job, is to look at a bunch of text and guess what the most likely next piece of text should be. And that piece of text has a name. It's called a token. This is how the AI sees our language, not always as whole words, but as these little building blocks. A common word like apple might be one token, but a more complex one like blueberries could be split into two, blue and berries. Even a comma or a period is its own token. So the process is this really simple, kind of relentless loop. The AI looks at the prompt you gave it, it calculates the odds for every possible next token, it picks one and adds it to the end. And then it takes that new, longer sentence and does the whole thing over again to predict the next token. And it just keeps repeating that, building its response one token at a time. And that brings us to the core problem. If the AI always chose the single most probable token, it would get stuck in these super boring, predictable loops. It would say, the cat sat on the, and the next word would always be Matt. Every single time. There's just no creativity or surprise in that world. So the fix is to introduce a little bit of, well, controlled chaos. Instead of always picking the number one option, we use a process called sampling. We basically tell the model, hey, look at the top few likely options and just pick one from that group. This simple little change is what unlocks all the creativity, and the way we manage that is with our control panel of parameters. And this is it. Welcome to the control panel. The best way to think about these parameters is as instructions for your creative co-pilot. You're not just giving it a destination anymore, you're telling it how you want to get there. Should we take the safe, predictable highway or the fun, scenic, winding road? All right, let's start with the first set of controls. These are really the main dials for creativity. They're the ones that let you adjust just how predictable or how totally wild the AI's output is going to be. First up is temperature, and this is your main dial for creativity. A low temperature, something close to 0, makes the model very confident and cautious. It's almost always going to pick the most likely, safest token. But when you crank that temperature up, it evens out the probabilities, encouraging the model to take more risks and choose less common, more surprising words. You can see the effects so clearly here. Up top, with a low temperature, the model is pretty much certain what the next token should be. It's a safe bet. But look at the bottom. With a high temperature, suddenly all 4 options look equally likely. This is where you get those unexpected, creative, and, yeah, sometimes very weird results.
Next, we have top K. Now, this is a really direct way to limit the AI's options. If you set K to 5, you are literally telling the AI, look, I don't care how many possible words there are. You are only allowed to choose from the top 5 most likely options. It just creates this fixed size pool of candidates for it to pick from. Simple as that.
Now, top P, which you'll also hear called nucleus sampling, is a little more sophisticated. Instead of a fixed number of choices, you give it a probability budget. For instance, if you set top P to 0.9 or 90%, the AI will look at the most likely tokens and keep adding them to its list of choices until their combined probability hits that 90% mark. So the key difference between these two really comes down to fixed versus dynamic. Top K always gives the AI a fixed number of choices, like the top 5, no matter what. Top P is way more flexible. If the model is super certain about the next word, that list of choices might only have 1 or 2 options. But if it's really uncertain, the list could have dozens of options, all fitting inside that 90% probability budget. It adapts to the situation. Okay, so now that we've dialed in our creativity, let's look at the next group of controls. These are all about refining the output, cleaning things up, and, most importantly, preventing the AI from getting stuck in those really annoying repetitive loops. The frequency penalty is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It puts a tiny little tax on any token that's already shown up a lot in the text. The more a token has been used, the higher the penalty, which makes the model less likely to pick it again. This is a fantastic tool for things like summarization, where you really want to avoid saying the same thing over and over. The presence penalty is similar, but it's more about novelty. It applies a one-time penalty to any token that has appeared in the text at all. It doesn't matter how many times. The whole point here is to encourage the model to introduce brand new ideas and broaden the topic instead of just drilling down on the same old concepts. And finally, we have this simplest dial of them all, max tokens. This is just a hard stop. It sets the absolute maximum number of tokens the model is allowed to generate. It's crucial for controlling how long you want your answer to be, and just as important, for managing your costs. Okay, so we've covered the theory behind all the main controls, but how do you actually use them? Let's put this all together into a really practical cheat sheet so you'll know exactly which dial to turn for whatever task you're working on. It's time to take the pilot seat. This little cheat sheet makes it so simple. For instance, if you need a straight-up factual summary for a report, you're going to want to turn the temperature and top P way down for focused, coherent text. But if you're brainstorming ideas for a wild sci-fi story, oh yeah, you're going to crank those dials way up. Each parameter gives you a specific type of control depending on what your goal is. And that's really the bottom line here. This knowledge fundamentally changes your whole relationship with AI. You're no longer just passively waiting for an answer. You are now actively shaping it, guiding the model with intention and control to get exactly the kind of output you need. You're the pilot now. But here's where it gets really interesting, because all this control leads to a pretty complex problem. Research is showing that as humans, we've something called a typicality bias. We tend to like and prefer AI answers that feel familiar and predictable. So over time, our feedback can actually train these models to become less diverse, pushing them to stick to a single, safe way of answering questions. And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question. As we get better at using all these dials to get what we think are better answers, are we just reinforcing our own preference for the predictable? Are we unintentionally taming the very creativity that makes these models so powerful in the first place? It's definitely something to think about next time you go to adjust the dials.